One thing that I realize while I am constantly observing the world around me is that silence at times isn't normalized and considered as a bad thing. Like a lot of the times at school, when I start shutting my mouth and stop having conversations with anyone for at least 2 minutes without any apparent reason, really. It doesn't take long for my friends to be concerned about me and ask me, "Hey, what's wrong?" And I say, "What?" And they say, "Well, you've become silent." And movies have been antagonizing silence in a way that when it's being projected, it's usually in the form of a horror or thriller movie. Like when it's in the middle of the night and the girl is sleeping peacefully, and suddenly the ghost, of course taking advantage of the silence, creeps out on her really, really slowly until she's captured. Silence makes people scared and uncomfortable, not particularly about ghosts or sadness, but because we associate it with those things. So the mere thought of silence itself makes some people shudder. And that maybe is one of the reasons why children are afraid of silence and of the dark so much, because of those visualizations and preconceived notions about silence. And in its nature, silence can be very odd and disrespectful to some people, and they will criticize you if they don't talk back or if you talk less with them. It makes them feel somewhat unimportant. But I am quite fond of silence. And it is an event of which I am really thankful that it actually exists. Especially today when I am recording this video because it's useful, of course. It helps all of us to be aware of our thoughts and to be aware that we are thinking. I use it for a peace of mind. I use it for calmness and tranquility. Many cultures and traditions actually value this phenomenon, especially in Hinduism. They have this practice called mana, which literally means silence in Sanskrit. And this practice is kind of like a vow to remain silent, where they subdue any form of physical speech. They subdue physical speech because they believe that if you have to talk, of course, it needs cooperation with your mind. So you have to think and then talk. The goal of mana is to have that cultivation of silence within, thus creating an ideal way and introspective way of thinking, a more logical one. Your mind should be free and calm in order to attain that, and it can be aided also with physical silence. And that is why they tame their tongues. They believe that unnecessary thinking and talking arises too many problems and misunderstanding because it can be uncontrolled at most times, especially when you are at the peak of your emotions. And one famous person who practiced this is Mahatma Gandhi. He tamed his tongue 1 day a week and communicates only through writing. But I guess I'm being biased for only talking about a certain type of silence according to what exactly I'm feeling right now. So let's try to dive deeper. There are certain types of silences that makes me feel different emotions for each. And one of them is the awkward silence. Awkward silence is maybe the most mortifying silence of all. But it's also, well, it's not that you want it to end, since talking might just be worse than saying silent. Somehow it gives you comfort that the person whom you are having awkward times with is not really talking to you because you don't want to talk either. But still, it's awkward, so It's more of like you want to get out of that situation and continue to enjoy your silence. I experience this a lot with people. You don't want to talk to each other, yet you two feel obligated to do so. So you tend to feel bad for not talking, but when you do, it can be embarrassing. The second thing is the silence of the night. This might be the most popular and the most comforting type one can ever experience. I guess the generation that we have today is known for the majority of the people who stays up late at night, and I belong to that percentage. I mean, I am doing it right now. I once asked my friend about this, and he's the type of friend who plays Defense of the Haitians every 3 o'clock in the morning. And I was curious of why he plays that late at that particular time. And he says, well, it's the ideal time where there are less toxic players and more players who knows how to respect. So it's more peaceful for him. And that is my point. It gives us peace when everything or everyone around you is literally at peace. Everyone's asleep, there might be less vehicles outside your house, and just the mere thought of the stars visible in the night sky. I actually once went outside to see the stars, and it was my first time to go night observing. This was like only a month ago. It is just within these years since I became interested with astrophysics and cosmology. But back then, I never really went outside to look at the magnificence of what I'm learning. But at that time, my mind was going a mile a second, so I decided to go out, listen to the silence, and for the first freaking time, I saw Ryan. And it was overwhelming for me for the thought that they are thousands of light years away, but we are still able to see their light. And somehow that thought gave me peace and euphoria. This type of silence that we experience during the night can inspire hope and peace within ourselves. But in contrast, sometimes it can also be a medium to think about our embarrassments and failures in life and our deepest regrets with it. But either way, at least for my perspective, it's still good. And this kind of silence works fine with me because it brings back my emotions and lets me to become aware of it, especially when I am numb during the mornings and the afternoons. It makes me feel human again. The third type of silence is the silence after a fight, particularly with loved ones. It's more of an inner silence, but weirdly, you also start to ignore the sounds and noises from your physical environment because you really care about this silence. Now, this is heartbreaking. I always experience this whenever my boyfriend and I have a fight, and suddenly the two of us decide to stay silent for a few minutes or hours. And I am blessed enough to have a boyfriend who knows, or at least he's trying to understand and feel whether I am okay or at my most vulnerable state, then ask me if I ever need some space and time to think. And at those moments, whether you are having a fight with your partner or even family members, it's important to seek silence. The silence that you will experience is barely a form of hatred, but more of an exhaustion that you start to stare at a wall or a ceiling and cry if you have to. And at those moments, you try not to think of anything else. You care about the person so much that you try to forget and you try to focus and understand and weigh what you did wrong and what the other person did wrong. You know you don't want to blame it all on the other person. So you make a plan on how you two are going to meet in the middle and resolve this. And I think that's beautiful. You see, it is in silence where our thoughts and emotions and problems arise. But it is also where we properly resolve these thoughts. Silence allows us to think critically and cool ourselves down for a little bit before talking to anyone, so that what we are going to say to the other person in line will be able to receive a well thought and a more healthy statement from you. Lastly, silence teaches you to just listen, especially when someone you love is trying to open up with you. It teaches you to humble yourself, let go of your opinions and your ego and your pride as a person, and let them talk about the things that they wanted to share. It allows you to have that perfection of combined empathy and sympathy that the other person needs. Sometimes people open up not because they want to be advised or comforted, but more on the fact because they want to be heard and they want to be able to hear themselves say it. Because they might already know the ideal situation or solution for their problems. They might know the right thing to do with it, but they just can't start working on it right away because they are too confused about their wrapped up emotions that they are feeling. And talking about it somehow organizes everything for them. And all you can do with it, if they are not asking for an advice, hug them and pat them on the back and tell them you love them and you hope for them to change for the better. I do not consider myself as a silent person. I mean, I do become silent occasionally, but most times I don't because my mind has a great affinity to chaos. I worry a lot. I think a lot. I obsess a lot. I definitely talk about my anxiety a lot on social media. But I want to end this constant anxiety. So, in everything I do, though it's hard, I do my best to seek silence. I think the best way to do it, if you are going to practice silence, at least inform people that you want space for a while so that they are not going to misunderstand you for being rude. And while you are on the process of doing it, still show that you care and show some compassion with your actions, even if you are not talking. Because, in the perspective of other people around you, you can be annoying and subtle and complex. It's really hard for them to show empathy because your emotions are not their emotions, and you have to understand that. So inform them and let them know that you are okay and that you are going to sit in silence for a while and it's not their fault and you are not going to disappear. I've made this mistake with my partner so many times, but I guess I'm blessed enough to have him with so much understanding for me and with so much faith in me that I might be able to change for the better. Ken, I love you. I'll see you in the next video.